Hi quilters, I'm Shelley Robson from the Quilted Forest, and it's time to talk about the block of the month for 2023. We're starting in January, we will go through December. This year I'm going a more traditional route. Each month we will be doing a basket block. Each month I'm going to show you 3 different ways I've made the block. One of the colorways I'm going to do is using 30s Reproduction Prints on a white background. Another finish I'm going to do is a red and white quilt. I've been wanting to make a traditional 2-color quilt for a while, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity. So mine's going to be red and white. And the third option I'm going to show you is going to be a Christmas quilt, because when we finish in December, it'll be nice to have a new quilt for Christmas. This year, the blocks will be 10-inch finished blocks. So each month they will measure 10.5 by 10.5. On the patterns, I will also give the measurements to make 5-inch finished blocks that will measure 5.5 by 5.5. So you can make either size or you can make both. The 10-inch blocks will all be set on point. So that means they won't be square when you look at them. They'll be set on point like this. I put together a few drawings on how I imagine the quilt will look at the end of the year. I don't have one made yet. I'll be making it all year long along with you. These are the 12 blocks that we'll be making. I might actually do this one reverse, where the background is light and the pieces of the basket are dark, but we'll kind of see how that turns out. Each month will be a different block. This month's block is this one right here. This will be the January block. So again, I'm going to do mine in 30s, red and white 2-color quilt, and then a Christmas version. The easiest way to finish the quilt off at the end of the year will just be to do a fabric for the setting blocks, and then the setting triangles and the corner triangles. You could also add a border or 2 if you wanted to, but you could just add those pieces in and call it done. Another way I've imagined finishing it is just to sew the blocks together. This would be a square quilt, whereas this one is rectangular. This one would be square, and it would be blocks set right next to each other, and then there would be one open space in the center. This one would be around 43 by 43. This one would be around 43 by 56.5. So these are more like wall quilts or lap quilts, but you can also make them bigger just by adding borders. One option I'm going to do with one of the quilts, I think, is to add Dresden plates on these open spaces, and possibly in the sides and the corners. And then I will probably add a border to it as well, so it'll be a little bit bigger quilt. And I've done this on another quilt, and I thought it would be a great idea. I don't know if I'm going to do it on the 30s one or the Christmas one, but I think one of them will have a finish like that. Another way I thought of finishing the quilt would be to do it kind of like a Boston Commons sort of feel to it, where these would all be the leftover fabrics put together, just squares sewn together. I could use the grid, or I could just sew the squares together, and then also do it in the corners, and then add a little inner border and then possibly an outer border that would be a little bit bigger. This would be a great way to use up all the extra fabric. I'm kind of excited to see where the options take me. And another thought that you might want to think about is that these empty 10.5-inch squares, 10-inch finished, could be your favorite block. So if you have a favorite 10-inch block, that would be a great way to fill that space and not have just a big empty square. So you can plan and kind of configure the quilt the way that you want it to be configured. Picking fabric for this block of the month can be really easy. I would suggest buying a fat quarter bundle or going through your stash and finding enough fabric. You probably need 1 or 2 fabrics per month plus a background. I would suggest getting 2 yards for the blocks and then an additional 1.5 yards for the setting squares and triangles. You can pull fabric and have it ready and waiting for the whole year, or you can pick fabric every month as the new blocks come out. Another way you could make this quilt is you could do a seasonal quilt where every month, depending on the month, you could pick fabric that works for that season or a holiday for that month. So like in January, you could use snowflake fabric. In February, you could use heart fabric. For October, you could use Halloween fabric. For Thanksgiving, in November, you could use pumpkins. So you could kind of base it off the calendar year and every month use a different kind of fabric for a fun, scrappy look. The patterns will be located on our Facebook group called The Quilted Forest Friends. You can find it in the files section and print it at home. Let's get to work on block number 1. It's time to cut. From the light fabric, cut a 6-inch square and bisect it corner to corner to get 2 triangles. Cut 2 rectangles that measure 3 inches by 5.5 inches. I started with a 6-inch strip of fabric so I could get all my pieces cut from just that one strip. Cut 1 square that measures 3 inches by 3 inches. Cut 2 squares that measure 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. On the wrong side of the light 3.5-inch squares, draw a line corner to corner. From the dark fabric, cut 1 square 6 inches by 6 inches and bisect corner to corner for 2 triangles. Cut 2 squares that are 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Cut 1 square 3 3/8 by 3 3/8 and bisect once corner to corner for 2 triangles. Now that everything's cut, it is time to sew. Make sure you use 1/4-inch seam allowances unless directed otherwise. We're going to start with the 3.5-inch squares. Place them right sides together and then sew a 1/4 inch away from that center line on both sides. If you didn't want to draw the line, you could use a diagonal seam tape instead. Make sure to hit that like button and write the colorway you're planning to use for our block of the month in the comment section below. When I'm sewing a smaller project like this, I usually try to cut these off the back side to send them through around the front so I don't have to stop sewing for very long. I just keep cutting it off the back side, bring it back to the front, and keep on sewing. Once you've sewn on both sides of the line, use your scissors and cut it apart, or you can take it over to the rotary mat and use your rotary cutter. Now it's time to press. You want to press these towards the darker fabric. Once they're pressed, you'll want to trim them to 3 inches by 3 inches. I like to use my block lock ruler for this because it's got that groove in the back and it kind of hugs the seam and makes it easier to trim. I have several sizes of the block lock rulers and think they're a very handy tool to make our half square triangle blocks perfect. Now it's time to piece the small dark triangles to the light rectangles. Line up the sides and the corner, and a small triangle should hang off the side of the rectangle. When you sew these together, make sure you have one that points left and one that points right as shown. Once that you have double checked that you have one pointing left and one pointing right, you will need to press to the dark fabric. Piece one large light triangle to one dark triangle. We're just making one of this block and press towards the dark. You will have one leftover dark triangle and then the other light triangle will be used in the corner of the block, so don't sew those other two together. Trim this block as needed to measure 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches. Now it's time to take all these parts and assemble the block. Piece the 3-inch blocks into 2 sets of 2. One set that points to the bottom right and one set that points to the bottom left. Once they're sewn together, it's time to press. I'm going to skip the ironing board this time and just do some finger pressing to get me to the next stage a little bit faster. Now it's time to add the 3-inch light square and lay out your pieces so that you know they're in the right positions. Piece the rows together as shown. Corner seams should nest together if you've been pressing towards the darker fabric. Once these pieces are sewn together, it'll be time to press. You can either go to the ironing board and press, or you can finger press. Press towards the light square and then the larger half square triangle unit. Piece the rows together, and then when you're done with that, you will want to take it to the ironing board to make this block nice and flat. I did use a little bit of spray starch at this point just to help those seams be cooperative. Next, it's going to be time to add those pieces with the small triangles on the ends. The small triangles form the base of the basket, and a small triangle will hang off the very edge as you sew those rectangle pieces onto your block. You'll want to press as you go, and this time we're going to press towards the rectangle. Now it's time to trim off the dog ears off the bottom. Make sure you leave your 1/4-inch seam allowance below the bottom tip of the basket. Center the final large triangle to the corner. You should have a small triangle of light hanging off both sides of the seam. Now it's time for the final pressing. You'll want to press towards the light corner. Once you're done pressing, you'll want to trim off those dog ears and square up the block to 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches. I also made the 5-inch block. The measurements are different, but the piecing instructions are the same as the 10-inch block. I love how the block turned out. I can't wait to make more for our block of the month. Here's the alternate colorways I used. Here is the Christmas colorway in both sizes and the red and white colorway in both sizes. I hadn't planned on making the 5-inch blocks in all 3 colorways, but they were pretty quick, so I decided I'm just going to go for it. Each colorway has its own project keeper. I'm going to keep the fabric and the blocks in there together as I go along. That way I always know where they are, and it keeps them nice and clean. I'm also storing the patterns in clear pages that I put into a 3-ring binder. Make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment for us, share this project with your quilting friends, and subscribe to make sure you'll see all the Block of the Month videos for this year. Thanks for watching, and happy quilting! You can make screenshots of this pattern or push pause and take notes, or a version of this pattern is available on our Facebook group called The Quilted Forest Friends. It's in the Files section. Make sure you find it.